This week, I tricked Gavin into letting me do this week's top 10 list by telling him I was going to do it about ponies or Muppets or something. But instead, we're going to do this week's top 10 list of the scariest games of all time, by my opinion, of course. So, I just have to warn you, this list is not for the faint of heart or the faint of butt. My number 10 game is Resident Evil 1, the remake on the Nintendo GameCube. The original Resident Evil put horror games on the top shelf for the consoles, equal to RPGs and action-adventure games. The GameCube remake improved upon the original by adding more monsters, new bosses, and a creepier environment compared to the original. Ammo, of course, was still rare. In most cases, it was better to run and flee than fight your way through a horde of zombies. I wish, of course, that they would have stuck to this format than going for what they did in Resident Evil 4, making it more of a traditional action-adventure game. My number 9 choice is also a console game, but it's D. No, not Vampire Hunter D, and not Pocky D. They haven't made a game of me yet. But rather, the first-person action point-and-click game, much in the style of Mrs. Siberia, the game D. It had no combat at all involved in it. The game came out in 1996 for the PlayStation 3, the 3DO, and the Sega Saturn, and of course, MS-DOS. The game takes place in a hospital that kind of gets turned into a castle for some sort of dark and twisted reality. You only have 2 hours to beat the game. That's right, only 2. Otherwise, you fail in the most horrific game over ever. There is no combat in this game, rather just pure puzzle solving. Your wits about you must solve this twisted tale. The game has multiple endings attached to it, so it's definitely worth trying out. For the 8th game in this list is the PC classic The Seventh Guest. Yet another first-person point-and-click game in the style of Mrs. Siberia. But this time, you play as Ego. Well, I would tell you, but that would be ruining the story. I will tell you that the game takes place during a series of events in a small town in a huge mansion that led to the death of several people. Sorry, hiccuped. The game had several challenges and no combat, meaning that at any point you could be taken away and murdered without any true ability to fight back. If you want a true old school feel to this, don't use the FAQs or YouTube like us old gamers had to do back in the day. On the chopping block for the 7th place is the hit indie title Lone Survivor. Made by Superflat Games. Indie Survivor is a wonderful 16-bit look with a difficulty attached to it. You eat, sleep, and scavenge your way through an incredibly detailed environment, dodging, sneaking, and only if it's absolutely at your last resort, shoot your way through faceless enemies waiting for you at every turn in this horrible urban setting. Worse yet, the hero may or may not be losing his grip on reality and questioning everything he does. Is he cracking under the pressures of living, or is this really happening to him? The game is dark, creepy, has different branching pathways, and takes place in a wonderful environment worth several replays. Moving on to the 6th place winner in this horror parade is The Slender Man, the 8 pages by Parsec Productions. Sorry, guys. Starting off as an internet meme and then becoming its own thing, the Slender Man is an FPS with no guns, no weapons, and all fear. You, the player, can only use a flashlight with the worst battery life in history, can only be used for a short amount of time before you lose it permanently in the game. The game's hero, of course, also hasn't been working out that much and doesn't run for very long or for a very large amount of time. This mixed with a villain that can teleport in any direction and be around any corner puts this game at an A+ in any horror game genre. Now, the game for our halfway point is the Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem for the GameCube. Eternal Darkness was one of those very unique, one-of-a-kind beasts, mixing Lovecraftian horror and telling the tales of people in different points of history, fighting imaginable horrors that their own mere presence could drive men mad. They also feature a system where the game itself would start playing with the players, telling them that their controller was busted, giving them the blue screen of death, or even telling them the most dreaded thing of all, your memory card was deleted! The game's challenge with gameplay equaled wonderful things, but unfortunately, we're looking at a sequel that may not be coming anytime soon. Moving on to the number 4 place, we have Fatal Frame 2, The Crimson Butterfly on both PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. Fatal Frame was a third-person action-adventure game and a first-person shooter, but players didn't get a gun. No, they got an old-style camera to defeat the angry ghosts and spirits. The players take control of a young girl who's searching for her twin sister in an abandoned Japanese village. The camera acted as mostly a normal camera, except, of course, the part where it destroys ghosts. You had to, of course, get the best lighting and keep the enemies in focus to do the most damage. Meaning, sometimes you actually had to move around the room to get the best light and constantly keep moving that camera to assure the most damage. If you're a fan of the Japanese version of Ring or The Grudge, I definitely would give this game a play. In the third place is PlayStation 1 version of Clock Tower. The Clock Tower originally came out on the Super Nintendo, but very shortly later came out on the PlayStation 1 with a great improvement upon it. The game had no real combat, but was more of a hiding simulator from you, the unstoppable killer, the Scissor Man. I think more like Jason Voorhees, but instead of a machete, he's using a gigantic pair of scissors that can cut through anything. Players had the ability to play as 2 different characters and had multiple endings for each character, giving a total of 10 endings to the game. Now, let's get to the second place in this list of horror with Silent Hill 2 by Konami, originally released in 2001. This is everything a good horror game should be. Dark and unforgiving environments, never sure where or when something is coming after you. A soundtrack that is just pure awesome, and of course an unstoppable evil that you can only do is run and hide from. Of course, I'm talking about the Pyramid Head. The use of both sound and lighting in this game makes you feel like that this world is just about to eat you up and spit you back out. The story is full of twists, and depending on what you do, you get one of the game's many different endings. I could easily do a full episode on the breakdown of Silent Hill 2. It's just that good, in my opinion. Now, you're of course saying, hey, that's number 2. Now, what could beat Silent Hill 2 from being the number 1 horror game of all time? Well, that is all of Frictional Games' horror games library. If I didn't put them down as all one subject, this list could have easily been devoted to half of their library. From all 3 Penumbrum games to, of course, Amnesia, and of course the new Amnesia 2, The Machine of Pigs. These games are the scariest games I have ever played, with an atmosphere that just will not let up. And everything from combat was clunky, but it fit the system. Weapons and ammo were rare to use, and everything took way more damage to kill than it was worth. You had to spend most of the game running and hiding from everything coming after you. I highly recommend to find these games and play them yourself, or have your friends play them and watch them freak out. It's hilarious.